the agencies involved, fire and rescue and the police, are out supporting communities in every way that they can. We have sent a notice to councillors, and there's updates across social media. So we will be doing everything we can to ensure that our communities are safe, but at the moment, everything's under control. So I'd just like to express our thanks for all the agency involved in this work. So thank you very much. So Nick, I don't think we have any apologies for absence, do we?
Nope.
Do we have any declarations of interest? Before we move to the main items of the agenda, I would just like to acknowledge 2 written feedback to Cabinet from the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee of the meeting held on the 7th of October, which was concerning the financial monitoring update, including the medium-term financial plan update and the investment and commercial portfolio performance update. There was a couple of actions that the committee asked Councillor Callard to take, some of which he will report back in writing, and some of which have been incorporated in his response today. The second feedback was on the meeting of Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee that was held on the 8th of October, and referred to the development of the Children's Placements Policy, the Safeguarding Annual Report, as well as the Chief Officer for Social Care Annual Monitoring Report. These, again, the actions that were put forward concerned the monitoring report, the Social Care Annual Monitoring Report, and the Chief Officer will be incorporating that when it comes to Council next week on the 24th. I'd like to thank the committee and its chair, Councillor Neil, for taking the time to send the written feedback into Cabinet, which, as you know, I shared with you last week. Thank you very much, Councillor Neil, if you're listening. So let's move on to item number 3, the 2024-25 revenue budget financial update. Over to you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to echo your comments, as well as our thanks to the teams that have already had a very long day out there supporting those at risk of flooding, and I think they've probably got a few hours to go yet in what is pretty terrible weather right now. Over to the report. This report provides up-to-date information regarding our financial performance against our budget. The first half of the 2024-2025 financial year has seen a continuation of financial headwinds, which are having a significant impact upon the Council's service operating environment. Summarised, these are the wider and longer lasting impact of the pandemic, both economically and socially. It continues to impact the Council, particularly in the areas of homelessness, children's services, adult social care and children's additional learning needs. The cost of living challenges continue to have an impact on our communities, with a consequential increase in demand for council services and impact upon income generating services. Whilst headline inflation has fallen, some areas of council services continue to experience cost pressures on supplies and services alongside supply chain issues. In continuing efforts to combat inflation, interest rates have also remained high, with revised forecasts suggesting that they will remain higher for longer than anticipated at the time of setting the budget. Although I'll just come in now and say that we've had some news today that inflation has fallen further than expected. So hopefully that we will start to see interest rates ease soon. And then finally, we continue to deal with a shortage of staff resources in some areas. Cabinet will remember that in our meeting in July, we received an indication that services reporting early cost pressures of £873,000. Since then, this position has deteriorated, with the latest forecast indicating a forecast budget deficit of £3,388,000. And an overview of this can be seen in table 4.2 in the covering report, but it will come as no surprise to Cabinet that the area of greatest pressure is in social care and health. The total forecast deficit against budget of £3.3 million is made up of in-year budget pressures of £1,334,000 that have developed since the budget was set in February, alongside a forecast shortfall in meeting budgeted savings targets of £2,055,000. Appendix 1 in the report outlines these service variances in detail. Of particular concern is our school budgets and reserves. The overall level of school reserves are currently forecast to move further into deficit by £4,929,000 by the end of the 2024-25 financial year, to a collective deficit balance of £5,832,000. The legacy impact of the pandemic continues with our schools, particularly in respect of attendance, behaviours and increased additional learning needs. This has required increased staff and specialist resource to tackle the issues of presenting and increased overall costs of provision. Higher than budgeted pay awards for both teaching and non-teaching staff have also impacted upon budgets. Those schools budgeting to end the 2024-2025 financial year in deficit are expected to bring forward recovery plans by October half term, and close monitoring and support will be given to these schools, as well as those at risk of entering a deficit position over the medium term, to ensure that the proposed actions to address medium-term budget challenges are instigated. As we move forward towards the next formal monitoring period, work will continue to deliver on the structured approach to tackling the underlying budget pressures, with particular importance assigned to tackling costs which have the ability to be recurrent for the 2025-2026 period and beyond. And Leader, if it's okay, we've got a number of recommendations with the report, and I will go through them if that's okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Callard.
The recommendations to Cabinet are as follows. The Cabinet note the overall revenue budget deficit forecast of £3,388,000. The Cabinet endorsed the budget recovery action as outlined within the report to mitigate the forecast deficit and bring the budget back to at least a balanced position by the financial year end. And the Cabinet notes the budgetary risks that are inbuilt into the forecast, and these are the volatility of demand for high cost services, particularly in adults and children's social care and additional learning needs. Continuing negotiation around national pay agreements, which will further impact forecasts if it results in an award over and above the current offer and no consequential funding is received. The risk of the increase in the rate of the employer's contribution to the teacher's pension scheme not being fully funded. The potential impact upon the Council's financial resilience from the forecast increase in the cumulative schools reserves deficit that is being carried on the Council's balance sheet. The risk of further non-delivery of the £10.9 million of budgeting saving targets, with services currently forecasting 81.2% delivery. The trend of reducing debt recovery, particularly within the council tax, where there is a significant increase in the number of discounts and exemptions awarded and slowing down in collection rates, and the severely limited reserve cover available to the council. Also, the Cabinet note the forecast increase in the deficit on cumulative school reserves as outlined in Appendix 3 of this report of £4,929,000. This would result in school balances ending the financial year in deficit of £5,832,000, with 19 of 34 schools forecast to be in a deficit balance. The Cabinet note that schools which are budgeting to end the 2024-2025 financial year in deficit balance are required to bring forward recovery plans by October half term to ensure that the proposed actions to address their budget shortfalls are instigated. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Callard. This is a comprehensive report which has gone through scrutiny, and I think across council we understand, like with many other councils, the position we find ourselves in because of 14 years of austerity. Does the Cabinet have any issues they would like to raise? I think at this point I can bring you in, Councillor John. I believe you have two questions you'd like to ask.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, can I just associate myself with the comments you made at the very start, Leader, about the work that council officers and council partners have been doing this afternoon to keep our communities safe. I'm particularly worried about a number of communities in my own ward. The River Trothy seems to be rising about 20 centimetres every quarter of an hour. And there's a couple of areas already where main roads have been cut off to a couple of the villages in my ward. So really grateful for the work that officers are doing. Just turning to the report, obviously the figures represent a significant worsening picture compared to the last update we had 3 months ago, an overspend of nearly £3.5 million. Cabinet members have recognised that the administration can't continue to use reserves, which are quite limited. So what will the administration do if the council is still facing an overspend at the end of this financial year?
Thank you, Councillor John, for the question. I think at this stage, it's quite a big what if. Last year, we managed to recover from a worse in-year position at this time and reported a surplus at year end. And although we recognise that the challenge is big, we hope that it's going to be possible to do the same this year. As an administration, we have no plans to use our reserves to support our revenue budget. However, they are there in case of emergency and act as a last resort should the authority require.
Okay, thank you. And I want to look at school budgets, and it's a particularly worsening picture for our schools. We're close to 2/3 of our schools heading into deficit, a combined deficit of almost £6 million. Tasked with drawing up budget recovery plans, I understand within the next 2 weeks or so. How many teachers and other school staff do you expect to be made redundant as a result of these recovery plans that schools will be drawing up?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. I think the concern about the situation of with our schools' budgets is something that we all share. You'll know from your time as Cabinet Member for Education that the schools' budgets are delegated. They're managed by the individual school leadership and their governing bodies. And they're also responsible for the staffing levels at the schools. We'll be working closely with the schools to support them with their budget recovery over the coming weeks. And I hope I'll have more specific information about that recovery to share with Cabinet at the next financial update once those meetings have taken place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Cabinet, Councillor Callard has already read out to us and explained the recommendations. Do we agree? Thank you very much, Cabinet. That's an agreement. Let's move on to item 4, the medium-term financial plan update and budget setting process for 2025 to 26. Over to you, Councillor Callard.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides the latest 6-monthly update of the Council's medium-term financial plan and sets out an initial modelled budget shortfall for the financial year 2025-2026. It also seeks to agree a budget setting process that will enable a balanced budget to be presented to Council in March 2025. The financial outlook over the near to medium term remains challenging, and the initial budget shortfall modelled for 2025-2026 is large, representing 5.5% of the Council's net budget. The Council will need to draw on its experience and track record of bringing forward significant savings proposals, income generation, cost reduction, tax increase, application of grant and service change will all need to play a part in achieving a balanced budget. This is a challenge that the whole organisation will need to respond to positively with thoughtfulness and urgency. It is achievable, but there will likely be unpalatable choices with the service offer in some areas reducing. Budget modelling and underlying budget assumptions are based on accurate and up-to-date information. Amongst other things, they benefit from in-year budget monitoring information, assessments of legislative changes and that impact service delivery, independent advice and analysis, and demand projections based on trend and data analysis. The proposed milestone dates in developing the budgetary process for 2025-2026 are shown in figure 4.9 in the report. The main report in Appendix 1 contains a considerable amount of data, as you'd expect. It is a thorough report, and I'd like to thank the officers involved, especially Jonathan Davis, for their work. Some of the issues that we have already touched upon in the financial update, such as schools' budgets, are highlighted in this report as well, but with a view to a more distant horizon. This report comes with 4 recommendations for cabinets, and they are that Cabinet notes a modelled initial budget shortfall of £11.4 million to be addressed. The Cabinet sets an expectation that the budget bills for 2025-2026 will recognise priorities set within the community and corporate plan, with reducing the impact of inequality on citizens and climate change on communities being central to our considerations. The Cabinet adopts the budget planning framework and timetable outlined in Appendix 1 and 2. And finally, the Cabinet note the current progress indicated against the medium-term financial strategy delivery plan as outlined in Section 13 of Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Callard. Cabinet, are there any questions? Councillor Chandler. How are things in your neck of the woods?
Yes, well, I'd like to echo the the appreciation for the council staff, the emergency services. As my ward is probably the most affected with the mono at risk, and particularly the village of Skenfrith. So, and I know I've been in close contact with residents in Skenfrith, and people are prepared and hopeful, but prepared for the worst as well. So, but I just want to reassure residents that we are supporting them in any way we can. So I think that's a message that's worth repeating. But back to the matter at hand, Councillor Callard. I mean, I've literally just half an hour ago got back from Cardiff, where I was 2 days at the National Social Care Conference, organised by ADSS, but where I've been talking with a number of other council cabinet members for social care, as well as officers, as well as WLGA staff and Welsh Government officers as well. And the recurrent theme seems to be across Wales about the challenges that particularly facing social care and the budgetary pressures, but also the more general pressures facing local councils. I just wondered whether you've got a bit more information about how does our situation compare with other councils in Wales. How much are we, well, that's the question. How do we compare with other councils?
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. I think it's a good question, and it's something that we obviously talk to our colleagues in other local authorities about. It's a difficult comparison to make a lot of the time, because varying local authorities make different assumptions about the level of support grant they're going to get from Welsh Government, with different modelling assumptions about their council tax and also the increasing cost in their services. So I think probably a good way to look at it is if we take a cut across the top and look at some of the figures the WLGA have recently reported, which is that across Wales, there is a forecast budget gap of £563 million for 2025-2026 against an all Wales budget of 7.762 billion, and that represents a shortfall of 7.25% as an average across Wales. And as I mentioned in our covering report, our shortfall model for next year is 5.5%. So it does look like from those figures that there are certainly local authorities who have a bigger challenge than us next year.
Thanks, Ben. The analysis does indeed look grim, and as we heard on the news this week, it also extends across the border, with one of our colleague local authorities in the Marches Partnership, Shropshire, going on record to say how close they are to bankruptcy. It's a difficult, challenging year for local authority. Councillor John, you have 2 more questions you'd like to ask.
I do, thank you. In the report, the council tax modelling for next year is increased from 3.95% to 5%. Previous performance tells us that that's the minimum increase we can expect from the administration. This is putting an ever-increasing burden on residents who already contribute over 40% of the council's income. So what representations is the administration making to Welsh Government about the unfairness of the funding formula, please?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. I think the fairness of the funding formula is a continuing debate. We recognise in Monmouthshire that that we are an outlier in per capita funding, and that being a rural authority does carry costs which perhaps more metropolitan authorities don't carry. But I'd reiterate that we're always advocating for Monmouthshire in our discussions with Welsh Government and with the Welsh Local Government Authority. We're working with our colleagues across local government in Wales to stress the importance of the services that we provide, and especially the preventative work that we do in our communities that alleviates pressure on other public services.
Okay, so are there any specific representations that you've made? You said you've been sort of generally advocating.
We do generally advocate, and when we discuss with Welsh Government ministers, which we do as cabinet members, then we are often talking about the importance of the settlement to us in the coming financial years.
Right.
If I could come in there, Councillor Callard, I am on a weekly basis talking to colleagues across local government, but also with ministers about the various issues within the council and funding that we receive, and I will continue to do so.
Excellent, thank you.
Cabinet members in their own portfolios continue to do so when the opportunity arises, which at the moment, as you can imagine, is arising quite routinely and regularly.
Good, okay, thank you. Secondly, according to the budget timetable, cabinet members have already had a briefing setting out the options for service cuts, but you're not due to share your preferred ones until the draft budget comes out in January. So what insight can you give the public between now and then as to which areas you're looking at for service cuts, please?
Thank you for the question, Councillor John. I'm sure you'll appreciate that with the budget, nothing is decided until everything is decided. You'll know from the report the severity of the situation we're facing next year, but until we receive information on our settlement from Welsh Government towards the end of this year, we don't yet know how much we'll need to save across our services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor John. I think, like every other council across the UK, we're waiting to hear the Chancellor at Westminster give her spending review report on the 30th of October before we make any decisions.
Doesn't sound very hopeful, does it?
Well, it's a matter of opinion, Councillor John. Let's wait and see what happens.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Councillor Callard?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, Leader.
Cabinet, we have 4 recommendations which Councillor Callard outlined to us. That we note the modelled initial budget shortfall of 11.4 million to be addressed. That we set the expectation that the budget build for 25-26 will recognise priorities set within the community and corporate plan, with reducing the impact on inequality on citizens and climate change on communities being central to all our considerations, as it always has been. That we adopt the budget planning framework and timeline outlined in Appendix 1, and we note the current progress indicated against the medium-term financial strategy. Well, we agreed, Cabinet. We are indeed. I think that brings us to the end. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you very much, people online who may have been listening. Go safely. It's very wet outside.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all soon.